The CMO Confidential podcast is a proud member of the I Hear Everything podcast network. Looking to launch or scale your podcast? I Hear Everything delivers podcast production, growth, and monetization solutions that transform your words into profit. Ready to give your brand a voice? Then visit iheareverything.com.
Welcome to CMO Confidential, the podcast that takes you inside the drama, decisions, and choices that go with being the head of marketing. Hosted by five-time CMO Mike Linton.
Welcome, marketers, advertisers, and those who love them, the Chief Marketing Officer Confidential. CMO Confidential is a program that takes you inside the drama, the decisions, and the politics that go with being the head of marketing at any company in what is one of the most scrutinized jobs in the executive suite. I'm Mike Linton, the former Chief Marketing Officer of Best Buy, eBay, Farmers Insurance, and Ancestry.com, here today with my guest, Seth Matlins. Today's topic, chaos, why it's the constant state of marketing. Now, Seth is a champion of marketing. His career includes stints as the president of Rock the Vote, CMO of Live Nation, and the founder of CAA Marketing. Currently, he is the widely followed managing director of the Forbes CMO Network. Previously, he wrote a book called The Scratch and Sniff Book of Weed. I always feel obligated to mention that whenever we talk.
I appreciate that.
I think it's great that you wrote that book. Now, Seth was also previously on the show to discuss, is the CMO position the hardest job in business? And he made a strong case that it is. Full disclosure, I've known Seth since my time at eBay when he was at CAA. Welcome back, Seth.
Thank you. Appreciate you being willing to bear with me yet again.
We think you're a great guest on the show. And let's just jump right into it and start by talking about the state of marketing. What you're seeing? It's been 9 months since your post on LinkedIn. I think it was New Year, same old shit for CMOs.
Yeah, it was. I said fuckery.
Oh yeah, fuckery. All right. Well, there we go. We're getting as many swear words out early in the show as possible. So, tell us what you're seeing now.
Pretty much the same fuckery. I mean, if we go back 9 months, it's, that post was in response to a Fortune magazine piece that was titled something to the effect of Fortune 500 companies eliminating the CMO role, which lacked any significant data scrutiny, understanding of our business, et cetera, et cetera. Fast forward to only 2 weeks ago.
Yep.
And Adweek basically parrots that Fortune headline with their own headline. Sorry, just reading it. Do all Fortune 500 companies have a CMO? They asked. And in their subhead, they comment, certain jobs are mandatory. The CMO's isn't. So yeah, same old, macro uninformed media point of view on this job. Chicken Little, sky is falling. From Fortune, it's one thing. From a marketing trade like Adweek, it's just, you would expect a little bit more insight from them. And at least in this case, you didn't get it. There is something just self-defeating and self-flagellating around CMO tenure, CMO narrative, which includes CMO tenure, which includes the displacement of the position. But it goes back to the fact that, what we talked about 9 months ago, the CMO's job is in fact the hardest job in business today for a host of reasons, not the least of which is the internal. The CEO and the CFO and the C-suite who do not understand marketing, but who think they might because they've been marketed to. Because they don't understand marketing as a strategic and financial driver, oftentimes.
Yeah, not always, but a rule here would be that. And I think the other thing you're referring to is some of these articles are not doing the math. Like we've had Richard Sanderson on the show to say, look, there's a bunch of companies that never had a CMO, never needed them. You shouldn't be counting them in the list.
Sorry, I got to interrupt you there because Richard, to his credit, did that, but he did not do it. And I'm going to take a little credit and give credit to Andrea.
You poked at him. Yeah.
Well, I didn't poke at him, but I poked at them. Yes. But credit to Andrea Brimmer, the CMO CCO at Ally Financial. This goes back, I think May, June, April, something like that of 22, where they put out their CMO tenure list. And it was really, and Andrea sent it to me. She's like, what the fuck? My words, not hers, perhaps.
Yeah.
And I took a look at it and, to your point, it lacked context. It lacked any relevant data. It only considered the top 100 advertisers. And then if you look at the top 100 advertisers, who are hardly a sample group that's representative of the rest of the world by virtue of them being the top 100,
Yeah.
Amazon doesn't have a CMO title, but it does have head of consumer marketing and head of B2B marketing, which is the same thing that both Fortune and Adweek don't address, right? And it's also a very US-centric point of view because the CMO title is much more prevalent domestically here in the US than it is around the world. So the real question should be, do these companies have heads of marketing? Do they have someone whose job it is to create and capture demand, to create customers, to drive integration of the enterprise so that there is a consistent, or as consistent as one can be in a decentralized landscape, narrative about brand, business, products, and services?
I think this is a really good point, and we should probably circle around to this another time and talk about why are the publications not doing what is just basic, some homework. This is basic homework. I mean, it's all available public information. So let's move on to another post you made, which is you posted about a Bill Bernbach quote about the difference between dull truths and exciting lies. Relate that to the marketing you are seeing today.
So I'm looking at it right now. I've had this little book, Bill Bernbach said, on my desk for.
It's a great book. Look, it's great.
A great book. I think I've had it for 30 years. Whatever I said in the post is what it is. I did the work at that point, and I don't remember now. It's just a bunch of his brilliant Bernbachisms, and they are brilliant and as relevant today as the day he said them. As relates to that specific Bernbachism, there's research coming out of the UK being done by System One and Adam Morgan of Eat Big Fish fame that goes under the broad title of The Cost of Dull. And they've done an analysis of some 6,000 TVCs in the US and the UK and found, my numbers are going to be slightly off, something like 48% of them elicit no emotional response whatsoever. None, zero, zip. And it's something like 70% of B2B TVCs. And they have begun the process of quantifying the cost of dull. Right, which is if you elicit no emotional response. Now, by the way, we should acknowledge that not every piece of work needs to elicit, be like it made me laugh, it made me cry, it was better than cats.
Yeah, raise me up, put me down. Yeah,
that's right, right. But in a landscape where it is so easy to be ignored, you got to do something to be unignorable, or you're just wasting all kinds of resources, time and capital, and human chief amongst them. And so, the task is to be interesting. And actually, Richard Dixon, who's, the relatively still new CEO of Gap Inc., said something the other day in their earnings reporting, which is,
finally a little turnaround for them.
Yeah. And it certainly feels like the beginning of something again for a brand and a portfolio that has a lot of equity, latent equity. But he said some version of, to make people interested, you have to be interesting, right? Really simple. But oftentimes we are not doing that, and
not at all. I mean, you look at a lot of these companies. What they're doing is they are making lists and publishing that list in the dullest possible way. Like, I'll pick on some of the car companies, which is, we're a great looking car. We have a great, we have good financing. Stop people on the road. Sit six. We have a reversible chair in the back, and we get great mileage, and also it's $200 cash back. Which to me is, all those ads roll up into almost nothing.
I don't disagree, and I point to the insurance category consistently, because here you have a low engagement category, a low consideration, which is say an infrequent consideration category. And yet consistently across the category, they do some of the most enduring work and some of the most effective work. It's like their work builds brand and performance and character and narrative over and over and over again across 4, 5, 6 of the category competitors. And it's kind of like, what's the rest of the world in higher engagement categories not getting? Now, for a car, you're probably in the market every 3 to 6 years. I don't know what the data, but the path to purchase begins 6, 8 months out, maybe a year out.
Yeah, maybe even longer, where you're thinking, if I have a chance, I'm going to get one of these.
Yes. It's as a category, not brilliant, and, wet roads and filmed on Avenue of the Stars and Century City.
I want to hum the farmer shingle because of your little tribute to insurance, but I won't. I want to go on to the chaos story.
Yeah, by the way, we should talk about that at some point. Why is that category so damn good? Farmers is a great example.
There you go. Thank you. Let's go to that. We can talk about it sometime, but I want to stay on the chaos thing and ask you, as an observer of all of this, what should be done about this perpetual state of chaos? And let's just add in dull into marketing, because we already said there's self-inflicted wounds here by all the pubs and a lot of the marketers themselves. And then we have dull. What should be going on now?
Well, I wouldn't be so presumptuous as to answer that for everybody, but I'll give you a macro thesis, bias, point of view, whatever. As much as everything is changing, and it is, and it will continue to, as much as chaos has become the status quo, if that even makes sense, the fact remains that there remain facts, enduring, universal, in particular, human truths that do not change, right? You know, our brains are wired exactly as they were 4,000 years ago. And so if we consider that in a world of change, humans stay largely the same from the architecture of a brain perspective, our psychology, our neurological systems, how we process and seek information, I think that too often, too many of us are like, and somebody else has said this, like, cats chasing a pointer, a light thing around the room, as opposed to, kind of taking a lesson from the world's greatest investor, Warren Buffett, whose company, of course, just became a $1 trillion market cap company.
Chilicorn. I'm going to coin that word.
Chilicorn, is that right?
I'm going to use that. I just made it up right now.
That's good.
Chilicorn. I'm trying to be not dull, Seth. I'm trying to be interesting.
What Buffett says, and I won't say it as well, is like, when people ask me where I'm investing for the future, I don't look at what's going to change. I look at what's going to stay the same. And if we marketed to those truths, to what stays the same, I think good things could come. But I would also say, and I'm going to talk about this about a month from now in Aspen at the Forbes CMO Summit, the 20th annual. I think too often we get so caught up in the chaos that we forget that the people we're trying to reach and influence are in the midst of chaos, and that the prevailing human condition, the current state, if you will, is one of anxiety, depression, fear, concern, worry, economic hardship, etc. Like, we're talking a lot about hope the last few weeks in some parts of the American political spectrum, but hope is like a lifeline because the rest of it doesn't feel that good. And I think we have to remember that the people we're trying to reach and influence, the people we're trying to persuade, are living through their own chaos. And if we don't consider that emotional context, we're really good at talking about the context in which our ads show up. Is it brand safe? Is this an appropriate?
Oh, yeah, we are very good at that.
We are not very good, in my opinion, and from my experience, at considering the how receptive people will or won't be, when they will or won't be receptive, because our emotions dictate our willingness to take risk, our willingness, our intolerance for risk, our willingness to bring in something new. And that chaos is interfering with purchase in a lot of.
I think this is an important point, and that a lot of companies think their logic will sell in the market when it's really an emotional, chaotic market as well. I want to, so I think that's a great point. I want to move into you publish a list of the top influential CMOs. I want to talk about that list, how it's evolving, and delve into your article announcing the unofficial number one on the Forbes World's Most Influential CMO list, where you discuss CEOs, boards, and related topics. Give us the top lines on all of this stuff.
So let me start with the list itself. The Forbes World's Most Influential CMOs list. This was its 13th year. It is a data-driven list. We work with Sprinkler and LinkedIn, analyze literally over 8 billion individual data points, where we're trying to create, and we're evolving into, better and better, if still imperfect, proxies for influence, right? How do you really isolate the influence chief marketing officer from that of a great product or a horrible product? We've evolved methodologically since I got here to do a few things. One, I think some of the measures previously awarded to, it was a little bit too much of a digital and social media popularity contest, which was that, if you had a big following, that was commensurate with influence.
Yeah, you're going to be up there in the list.
Yeah. And that was the case. It is not the case. A big following is no guarantee of influence. It's not an indication of influence. It's an indication of the potential for influence, just as a small following is no indication necessarily by default of an absence of influence. So we've changed that. We've refined our proxies for influence. We no longer just consider positive sentiment around campaigns, because or the CMO themselves, because sometimes negative sentiment can be wildly influential for the broader community at large.
Right.
And then 2 years ago, which is say 2023, for the first time we used financial data as some incremental metric, right? Again, how do you figure out the CMO's role in financial data? We didn't look at EBITDA, we looked at revenue growth, because at the end of the day, while the CMO is not alone responsible for or accountable to that, within a portfolio of financial metrics, we thought that was the most interesting: revenue growth and market capitalization. This year, we refined that a little bit further to look at peer sets. So we looked at automotive.
So now you get a relative difference in how you're doing.
Exactly.
Nice.
And so we continue to, we think, get smarter, get better, and remain wide open to anybody's suggestion as to how we can get better still. Let me talk to you about, the second part of your question, which is the unofficial number one. So the list is,
number one. Yeah.
As I said, data-driven, and it's ranked 1 through 50. When I got here a couple of years ago, I created an unofficial number one, and that first year, the unofficial number one was "quote unquote" anyone, because anyone with a phone or a camera or a keyboard can influence the trajectory of a brand and a business in an instant, right? For the ill, it's what Kid Rock did, and and for the good, it's Ocean Spray Guy.
Yeah.
It was really a commentary on the decentralized landscape that marketers, CMOs in particular, have to deal with, right? And in a list about influence, it's no longer about control. It is, in fact, increasingly about influence, because the CMO is in control of very little, including what their CEO does or doesn't say, as example. Right. Last year, it was Sam Altman, really as a proxy himself for the then and still now TBD implications of GAI on marketing inputs and outputs. And this year, as you pointed out, I named the CEO the unofficial number one, because the CEO has an outsized influence on what their CMO is or isn't able to do. And data out of McKinsey shows that only 10%, maybe even less than 10%, of the CEOs of the world's largest enterprises have any marketing background whatsoever, let alone even fewer of them who were ever CMO. And that puts aside the rest of the C-suite and the CFO in particular. And because they don't understand marketing, yet oftentimes think they do because they've been marketed to, right? the hardest things to do, but the easiest things to have an opinion on. Just, imagine if everybody had an opinion on finance like that. Because they don't understand it, they don't know what to expect, what not to expect, and on what timeline. And because they don't know those things, they are suboptimal allies to proponents of and stewards of the resources, human capital and otherwise, that are given to their CMOs to go do the hard job of driving growth in a chaos market.
I think this is a great topic, and I do think this is dead right. We've done a couple shows on this, including the battle of believers and non-believers. I want to flip to some of the big changes that are creating chaos in the marketing world, or just the evolution of marketing.
Yeah.
There's a couple things you could talk about, any or all of them. The Google cookie reversal, that's emergence of retail networks, including the Netflix ad-supported work. Tell us what you're thinking about some of the changes. Throw in any you want, and tell me how marketers should be thinking about that.
Well, let me address cookies first, and
Okay.
that I'm really not an expert in this, but what it is exactly as you framed it, which is it's evidence of the continuing chaos, on again, off again. It's like my 8th grade relationship. And
wow, I was just trying to get anybody to talk to me in 8th grade.
I peaked in 8th grade. It's been downhill since. Look, so the implications are at the macro, it's chaos. It's like stop. Yeah. There was so many resources wasted in pursuit of something that, at least for now, still hasn't come to pass. But it's really going to be a function of, here's the good news. If you can consider it good news, the status quo of third-party data reliance, it continues, and to the extent that's been predictable and useful, it continues. On the other side is our move to first-party data that should be more reliable and certainly more proprietary, is delayed. There's certainly, that probably affects redeployment of capital, both in, the money that has been spent preparing for it, and it doesn't, in fact, see as much capital redeployment as might have been the case if the cookie had in fact crumbled. Sorry, that was there.
That's good. This is it's a massive head fake that has cost a huge amount of money and a huge amount of prep for something that isn't exactly. And you still have AI looming over on the search thing anyway. So it's crazy land. What about the or it's tough? It's just tough, especially with.
I think crazy land is right. It's tougher than tough.
Yeah. I mean, all the tools that, were there are all in, a lot of them are in decline, and the new tools haven't emerged yet. So
that's
bring them together. Speaking of new tools, what's your take on the retail networks and how they are emerging, and how should marketers be thinking about this?
Well, I don't think they're new tools. I think that's old wine, new bottles. They're just, it's just media, right? Now it's media that presumably is, and certainly conceptually is, closer to, capturing intention.
Right.
It does benefit from, presumably, again, better first-party data, better buyer data. But if I was a retailer, or if I had any, I'd be doing it too. You have to continue to look for adjacent and ancillary revenue streams, and whether it's Lyft and Uber or Walmart, and you mentioned Netflix and Lowe's, and you name it, they've got it. If you can serve an audience and capture incremental revenue because you're serving them something of value, 2 thumbs up.
Yeah. All right. I know you have followed Nike, and I think they had a tough earnings call this summer. And a pretty big drop in their stock price. When you look at them from a marketing perspective, any key marketing takeaways in your mind?
I don't know why John Donahoe still has a job, to be honest. I mean, let's just say it. He's been a disaster there. And I know he was your boss at eBay, and He came in as our work on the brand's behalf was ending. And I don't think that John has demonstrated over the course of time that he really understands brand. And, he's, despite having worked for brand-driven organizations, a lot of what I know about this comes from that terrific piece that some ex-Nike marketing exec, I can't remember his name. I think it might have been an Italian name. I don't think he was the CMO, but he was a very senior marketer, wrote probably 4 to 6 weeks ago now. And he kind of, if I remember correctly, identified 3 things, right? He said, and there was a piece that came out over the weekend about, the McKinsey-ification, the consultification of Nike and the harm that's done, right? So it makes intellectual sense that for a brand like Nike 5 years ago, you'd want to capture, as much margin as you can. You're the big dog. And so it makes sense to think about an enhanced DTC model. Why not capture that margin? But of course, and as this guy's article pointed out, and I apologize to him for not remembering his name, that ignored the reality that where we're sold creates context for the brand, right? It puts an imprimatur on it. Not every place and every time, but sometimes. And Nike literally gave up shelf space to the competitive set. They became harder to find. They didn't get the aura of some of the specialty retailers that they once had. They reorganized internally, taking everything that was product driven, where they had product and category specialists, and they made it about demography, which is just mind-blowingly dumb. But I think that the biggest lesson, and I hope Nike learns it, because Nike's an important brand to people, but it's an important brand for our industry. And we need them to be great at what they do, but they've lost, it seems, sight of what it is they do, and maybe more importantly, who they are. And as they went DTC, they went to a performance-driven model, which again, intellectually for sure, that makes sense. Why not? But they lost the brand. And when they lost the brand, and the product began to be dependent on something other than great product people internally, but Travis Scott, they lost sales. And they lost shelf space, and it became a self-perpetuating cycle. And they get punched in the face, like 8%, 18%, something down year to date. I'm surprised he's still there, to be honest.
Goes back to your early quote about the emotional part of all the business. I think any last advice you want to give to marketers before we go to our last and traditional last question?
Be brave, be bold, be smart. Like, I don't know, that's terrible advice. It's so trite. It's like a bad cheers at,
we salute you.
Exactly.
We salute you.
I hope everybody will forgive me for that. But I guess it's still true. But no, I wouldn't presume to give those who I don't know advice.
All right. So last question. Funniest story you can tell on the air, or practical advice to marketers we haven't yet talked about yet, so you can't go back to the brave thing. You can pick one or both, but you have to pick at least one.
I'm not good at funny, which I think is obvious over the course of this 40 minutes.
I'll do funny for both.
But can I tell you my greatest Hollywood moment? Having spent some
absolutely,
years,
I definitely want to hear it.
Okay, so I think it's 2002. I think it's January of 2002. It's Oscar weekend. This comes back of 2002. And iTunes had not yet launched. I represent, but it was about to, and it was going to launch, I think, in that year's Super Bowl. I could be wrong. It might have been a year later. I am at CAA at the time, and I represent a huge global brand that was given first look at being the launch partner on that. They ultimately passed, and for those who remember this era so long ago, iTunes launched with Pepsi inside the Super Bowl as their big partner. But I was with the CEO of this company on Oscars weekend that year, My recollection is it was 02 because it was right after 9/11. And Steve Jobs flew down two of his most senior executives working on iTunes, one of whom I'm pretty sure was Eddie Q, but Eddie Q was not Eddie Q famous at that time, so I can't be certain, to meet with myself, the CEO of this company. We were at Jimmy Iovine's house, by the way. Jimmy and Steve were very close, and Jimmy Iovine's house was quite remarkable.
Jimmy Iovine is a very big music guy.
Legend, deserved legend. And there were three other people there. It was Bono, Edge, and Larry, because U2, as some might remember, wound up with a partnership of their own with iTunes a couple of years later. And so these guys present iTunes. And as they do, I'm Bono, Edge, and Larry are sitting on a couch. I'm just standing up, like literally right behind Bono. When they're done presenting it, Bono looks up at him and says, this is about the song. We make albums. What are the implications for us? And, what a prescient, what a smart insight. Oh. And, of course, he was absolutely right. We then had lunch, and the band went to rehearse for the Oscars, their Oscar-nominated song. I can't remember where it was from, which film, and they had never played it in the same room before. They had always done it remotely.
Wow.
And that, iTunes, Bono, Oscars, like pretty good. Pretty good story.
It's
not funny. It's not funny, but it's pretty good.
It's a good way to end. I want to go uno, dos, tres, cuatro. Oh no, that was the iTunes song that they put out. So on one of their commercials. So thank you, Seth, and thanks to everyone for listening to CMO Confidential. Look for more of our shows on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and the I Hear Everything Network, which include an operations-trained CEO dishes on what he really thinks about marketing. Is AI an extinction event for agencies? Marketing, the battle between believers and non-believers, parts 1, 2, and 3. Of course, Seth's other show is Marketing, the Hardest Job in Business, and Tales from the Marketing Crypt. Hey, all you marketers, stay safe out there. This is Mike Linton signing off for CMO Confidential.